Very good.
Thank you. Right, so welcome to this first creative literature webinar. We're happy to have Dr. Carleen with us. She introduced creative writing to our students, and they are looking forward to this event. We have Ludo. Ludo, can you help me pronounce your second name, please?
Of course, it's Cinelli.
Cinelli, okay, that's good. I was going to say something else. So Ludo Cinelli will be with us, and we'll have listen to a talk by him, help our students and understand the whole industry of creativity and publishing. As far as we need to be really into this, and I'll leave it to Carleen. I leave the floor to Dr. Carleen to take this over. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Shadia. So before I start, I just want to mention to everyone that this event is two parts. So first we have the talk by literary agent Ludo Cinelli, and then that's followed by Q&A. And then English literature students will be reading short pieces of their own fiction, which they developed over the course of last year. So it's my absolute pleasure to welcome Ludo Cinelli from the Eve White Literary Agency in London as our guest speaker today. So the Eve White Agency represents many leading authors in fiction, non-fiction, as well as in children's publishing. Ludo is a literary agent, and he's also the managing director. So that means he's involved in running the business day to day. Interestingly enough, he has an MA in creative writing from Royal Holloway, which is at the University of London. And today he'll be talking about the job of the literary agent, so what it involves, as well as UK trade publishing more generally. It's a very informal talk, so questions are really welcome. So whether you have a question about publishing your novel, whether you want to know about trends in fiction publishing or even non-fiction publishing, whether you want to know about translating and translations, or how to get started with a career in publishing, Ludo's more than happy to answer all those questions. So what we'll do is, so after after his chat, after his talk, there'll be Q&A. You're very welcome to put that into the chat box or just raise your hand, and then you can ask him directly. So a very warm welcome now to Ludo.
Thank you very much, Dr. Carleen. Thank you all for having me. I look forward to discussing my profession and my industry. I'll say up front that the publishing industry can have quite a lot of jargon and very specific, strange lingo that I want to do my part in democratizing. So if ever I say something that you don't understand, if ever I use a word that doesn't make sense to you, please let me know in the chat, and I'll do my best to explain, because it's very easy for me to slip into using words like trade paperback and advance and royalties based on net receipts without fully explaining what I mean. So please don't ever let me be misunderstood without letting me know. So in terms of how I'm going to do this, I want to talk a little bit about what literary agencies do in the beginning, and the way I'm going to do that is to talk through a case study with one of my writers who I work with, we call them clients. So first off, a little bit about our agency. We were founded in 2003 by Eve White as an independent agency. Eve still runs the company from her house, and that's where the office is. But she founded the agency with with the thought of having an agency with a really small family feel. So we feel very informal and friendly, but we're still very professional in what we do, and we pride ourselves on doing the best work we can for our clients. And essentially, the work of a literary agent is to exploit rights in their work and exploit as many rights as possible. And I'll unpack that a little bit. What I mean by exploiting rights is selling the right to, licensing the right, sorry, to produce and sell copies of a work. And that may be, that may be in a print book, that may be in an audiobook format, that may be selling to a production company who makes films or television, who wants to adapt the work into a film or a TV show. And so that's essentially what we do. We manage the business side of our clients' careers, and we manage the exploitation of the rights in their work. So that may be with a thriller writer, that may be with someone who writes, who's written a memoir about their extraordinary life, that may be a very commercial children's book that's just going to be a great crowd pleaser. We really work on all sorts of things. We take on authors whose work we love, and because we're such a small agency, I think we're able not to specialize. We can just work on whatever we feel like. So I'll show you two of my clients' books, for example. This is a Big Panda and Tiny Dragon. I'm not sure if it's the right way round on your screen, but this is a wonderful illustrated nonfiction book with these wonderful two characters who they explore this landscape together, and they have little aphorisms next to them, little pearls of wisdom from Buddhism and other forms of Eastern philosophy and spirituality. And it's a book designed to make people feel better, essentially. So that's one end of the spectrum. And then completely at the other end, we have Hollow in the Land by James Clark, who is a wonderful short story writer from the northwest of England. And these are stories about extraordinary moments in very ordinary people's lives. And it's just really all about the wonderful writing and imagery, and hopefully some prize-winning stuff in there. So let me tell you about how I got into this job. I thought I wanted to be a novelist, and so coming out of university, I went to do a creative writing master's and tried to develop my craft. And on the master's, I actually found that I didn't think in the end that the writer's life was for me. I thought I found myself enjoying having written more than writing, which I think is the wrong way to go about things. However, on the MA, what I really learned was to edit and to work closely with other writers in a kind of workshopping environment, and really to understand what a fellow writer was trying to do, and to help them develop that. And so I wondered if I could use that in some kind of professional capacity. And I knew someone who worked in the publishing industry in a publicity role, and she said, "Why don't you give it a go?" And so I decided to try and find some work with publishers, and I found some internships with some literary magazines, some publishers, finally a literary agency, and then basically I was there for a few months as an intern, doing anything they needed me to do. So from postage to reading submissions. And finally, I managed to find this job with Eve White, and that was back in 2017. And I joined as Eve's assistant. And back then it was just the two of us as running the company. And earlier this year, the company grew to 3 people. But since then, we've just been focusing on finding new clients and and optimizing the careers of our current clients. And hopefully, by talking about my first client, James Clark, I can explain how that process all worked. So James, he came to us in quite an interesting way. So in the first instance, we usually hear from people who haven't been published before. I would say that's what probably 95% of the emails we receive, if not more, of the submissions we receive are from writers who haven't been published before and want to be published. James, however, had been published. He, through his own creative writing MA, he had met an editor who works with a small press called, when I say press, I mean publisher, a small publisher in the east of England called Salt. And they had agreed to publish his first novel. And however, novels are notoriously easier to get published than short story collections, which for one reason or another, publishers find quite difficult to sell lots of copies of. And so he found himself a little bit stuck. He had this beautiful collection of short stories that he didn't really know what to do with. So he decided to write to a few agents, and he went onto our website and found some guidelines on how to submit to us. And the guidelines are pretty simple. All we ask for is three chapters or 3 short stories if it's a short story collection, and a synopsis, which is essentially a document that outlines, say, the plot of a novel, or the kind of overall arc of a short story collection. And on top of that, we ask for a covering letter in which you explain who you are, why you're writing to us, why you need an agent, who your influences are, that kind of thing. We'll talk more about that. So James, he found us, and he wrote to us. He sent us an email. A few days after that, our reader, who reads all of our submissions, she was going through the submissions inbox, and she spotted his email, and she had a read of the first 3 stories in his collection and thought, wow, this is really terrific stuff. And so she then recommended that I have a read, and that's how the process works. Because if we were to read all of the submissions that we had ourselves, we wouldn't have time to look after the clients that we currently have, because we receive well over 10,000 submissions every year. So it's an extremely competitive thing. Far more books get submitted to us than what we can take on. We probably take on 5 or 6 new clients a year of those 10,000 plus. So it's a very, very selective process. And the reason it's so difficult is because it's difficult to sell a book once we've taken it on. And so we have to really be extremely ruthless with the decisions that we make, and really only take on the books that we feel very, very confident that we're going to sell. And thankfully, Hollow in the Land was one of these books. So James had written us a really extremely well-written cover letter, which featured things like, it was a professional cover letter. It treated it like a business relationship. It wasn't too informal. It wasn't too formal either. It was clearly by a skilled writer, and a covering letter really gives an excellent first impression. So he had submitted to a few agents that he'd researched very well, people he thought, he'd done his research, he'd gone onto lots of literary agents' websites, and decided, well, this is, say, a handful of agents, 5 or 6 agents who I really think I could work with, and that's who he wrote to. And so then I read his first 3 stories, and I thought these are absolutely brilliant. And so I emailed him and I requested to read the rest of the manuscript. So he emailed back, and I had a read of those, and the rest of the manuscript was just as brilliant. And I really saw the potential here for a collection of stories that was that was grounded in reality, and the reality of a specific area of the UK that James knew so beautifully and could speak about so well, and I think could be recognized and could enlighten a lot of the readership. So once I'd read the manuscript, and Eve, my colleague, had read the manuscript too, we decided, well, we would love to work with James. We would love to represent this. So we invited James down to London, where our office is, to have a meeting, and essentially we gave him the same talk that I'm giving now, explaining how the publishing industry works and what the next steps would be for us if he decided to accept our offer of representation. So thankfully that meeting went well, and I'll explain how that process went from there. We signed a contract with him stating that we were now his exclusive worldwide literary agent, and he wouldn't have an agent elsewhere without first terminating an agreement with us. And we then set to work doing some editing on the manuscript. It didn't need very much because James is an extremely skilled and polished and perfectionist writer, and really had taken lots and lots of time to perfect these stories and bring out the absolute best in them. But there were still certain things that I felt could be improved. For example, the connections between the stories. I think, with short story collections, I think publishers are really looking for for things that can flow into each other, and manuscripts that give a sense of thematic unity, let's say, and cohesiveness. And so we did a little work, and that just involved me writing to James and back a few times with edits. And then once we got, I should add, with a novel, it might be something like, the first half of the novel is too slow and we want to pick up the pace. If it's a thriller, we might think, okay, do we need an extra twist at the end? If it's a children's book, we might think, oh, this is a little bit too long, we need to cut it. So it could be anything. And different clients really require different levels of support. And part of the reason why I love my job is that every writer that we represent is completely different and requires a different level of care and attention. So every day in the office is completely different. So essentially, once we had a manuscript ready that we felt, well, we really can't do any more work on this. This is the absolute best we can get it. Then what I do is I put together a pitch for publishers. I say, okay, this is, how can I entice the publishers? How can I put together, on the back of a book, you have a blurb. And I'll put together something similar to this to think, hey, if I had to pitch this book in, 150 words or however long it is, then how would I really sell it? What is the best? How can I highlight what really shines about this manuscript over any others? And essentially, then what we do after we have written a pitch is we come up with a list of publishers that we would like to send this to. So we have a big database of pretty much every single publisher working in the UK at the moment. And we keep that up to date by every week going through the industry news and seeing which publishers have bought which book. And that way we create a really effective map of what everyone is buying at a certain time. And, there's publishers come in all different sizes. So there's tiny independent publishers with just 1 or 2 employees. There's more medium-sized publishers with, say, 10, 15 employees. There's bigger ones like, say, Faber. I think they have, probably 80 to 100. And then there's what we call the big 5, which are Penguin Random House, Simon & Schuster, HarperCollins, Hachette, and Pan Macmillan, which they each have probably a few hundred to a few thousand employees. So really, they come in all shapes and sizes, and on the whole, they can compete with each other. Even a publisher with just one employee can do a really good job with certain books and sell lots and lots of copies. But essentially, the way that the acquisition of books works at publisher, the way they decide which books to work on is they have members of staff called editors, and editors are like project managers within each publisher. And within each publisher, there will be many editors, especially at a big one. So, for example, Penguin, a publisher you might know from this. Is it? Oh no, they don't actually have the Penguin logo on. It's very small there. Hopefully you can see it. But they're probably the most famous publisher. They have the best branding, I would say, or the most well-known branding anyway. They are split up into a few divisions who are actually all able to compete with each other on the submissions they receive. And even within the divisions are broken up into imprints, and an imprint is like a sub-publisher within a publisher. And that imprint will have several editors buying books for that imprint. So it's a lot to navigate, and that's why it's important for a lot of authors to have an agent. Another reason is because some publishers will accept submissions, manuscripts from writers who don't have agents, but many, especially the big ones, usually won't. And so we are able to provide access to those publishers. And so essentially what we would do, what I did with Hollow in the Land is I did my research. I went into our database of editors and I had a look at the editors who are commissioning short stories, who are commissioning what we call literary fiction, which is this the type of fiction which is most concerned with exploring the human condition, with grappling with big themes, and which you might usually see on shortlists for literary awards and things like that. So I had a look and I thought, okay, which writers are similar to James and who publishes them? And asking myself those questions, I came up with a list of, say, probably 12 to 15 publishers who I thought, yes, this would be really perfect for. The editors who I thought, yes, they will fall in love with this. And thankfully, one of them did. So I sent it to Hannah Westland at a publisher called Serpent's Tail. She's the publisher there. She's the most senior editor they have. And she wrote back to me very quickly to say that she was interested. And she ended up making an offer and we decided to accept. And an ideal situation for us is one in which several publishers offer to publish a book, because that allows us to negotiate the best terms for our client. So the main term that we talk about is an advance, and that is a sum of money that a publisher pays up front in order to secure a book, to secure a contract on a book. That advance can be anything from if we're talking in pounds, we're talking 3 figures at the smallest end and 7 figures at the highest end. So it can really completely vary. And that is based on the number of copies that a publisher expects to sell of a book. So that advance is set against the royalties that the publisher will pay an author. What is a royalty? A royalty is an amount that is paid on each sale. So this is an oversimplification, but for example, this hardback book, I believe, was on sale for £12.99. And I'm not sure off the top of my head what the royalty exactly is for it. But say, for example, James was on a 10% royalty for each sale, then James would earn 10% of £12.99 for each copy that was sold. And all those royalties have to add up to the advance before before James sees any of that money. Of course, he'll have seen the advance. That's usually paid on signature of contract, on delivery of manuscript, and on publication. So I'm sure there will be questions about that, because I probably didn't explain it in the clearest way. But in any case, we try to negotiate the best royalties for our clients, the highest possible advance and the best royalties. We earn a commission based on what our clients earn. We don't earn anything from the publisher. The publisher doesn't pay us anything. The publisher only pays our clients pay us. So essentially, if our clients are doing well, then we're doing well as an agency. However, it doesn't always happen. Well, so the ideal situation, as I explained, is that several publishers want to offer, and then we run an auction for the rights on the book. That didn't happen in this case. We accepted an offer from a publisher who offered. And sometimes we send a book out and there are no offers, unfortunately. And we have to go back to the drawing board and think, okay, what can we do here? Shall we talk about next book ideas? Shall we see if there is another group of publishers we can send this to who we didn't send it to the first time? And we have those conversations and we advise our client and come up with a plan that works for both of us. So what we try and do in the first instance with most books is to sell UK and Commonwealth rights. So sell rights to print and publish the book in the UK, and then leave it at that with the UK publisher, and then repeat the process in the US directly. We do that. And then in translation through what is called a sub-agent. So a sub-agent is another agency who specializes in translation rights and can sell books all around the world. And we then split our commission with that agent. So, however, sometimes what usually happens is that the UK publisher buys world rights because they have a team who sell rights to other publishers around the world themselves, and then they take a percentage of those sales too. Obviously, that detracts from what the author earns, and so that's why we prefer to sell directly. So once we have a deal, once we have a publisher for our client, we are there to talk about to constantly protect their interests when it comes to dealing with that publisher. So we want to make sure that the publishers are spending enough time, money, resources in promoting the book. We want to make sure that they are pitching it to newspapers. We want to make sure that they're doing any advertising that they might be doing, that we want to make sure that they're submitting the book for literary prizes. And so we are there to help our clients ensure that their publisher is doing enough to sell the book. Unfortunately, publishing is an extremely competitive business. Even the books that do make it to the shelves, most of them don't sell enough copies. Most of them make a loss, unfortunately. And so we want our clients' books to be at the top of the list. We want we want them to be in the window of the bookshop as you walk past. And we also handle all the administrative side of that. So we look after the contract with our clients, the contract that they have with their publishers, and make sure the terms of that contract are enforced. We make sure that the publisher's payment schedule is on track. When a client delivers their manuscript, we write to the publishers and say, hey, it's time for you to pay delivery. We essentially we also need to keep on top of who's in the industry, have meetings with editors with new editors and with editors we haven't seen in a long time. We handle film rights, not directly, again through a sub-agent, but for example, we have an agent who works in the UK film industry who is looking after this book for us and hopefully trying to sell it to production companies who want to make it into a film. We essentially just, I'm learning every day on this job, because every book requires a different type of care, and there are new opportunities for writers and their books at every turn. So for example, I can think of one client, one of my colleague Eve's clients, who came to the end of her contract with for her thrillers that she was writing, and she wasn't sure what to do next. And we got approached by an audiobook publisher who wanted to commission a series of novels based on a very, very well-known familiar brand, and they needed someone who's extremely good at writing to a brief. And they explained what the brief was, and we put it to our client, and we did that deal for her. And you know, we'd never done an audiobook exclusive deal, so it was really exciting to be able to break into a new market, and we're very proud to be able to provide that kind of dynamic care to our clients. So I think that's all I have in terms of a very, very, very quick tour of what an agency does and how the publishing industry works. But I hope that my talk has sparked lots of questions, and that you will unpick things that I've said and want to delve deeper into some of the subjects I've covered. Thank you all for listening.
Thank you so much, Ludo. That's an absolutely fascinating talk. I'm sure there are lots of questions, so I invite people now either to put a question in the chat. There we go. Thank you, Ludo. And you can also ask it directly. I'm afraid I can't see everybody, just the way it's set up. So I would say just you know, unmute your mic and ask the question. I think maybe that's best. So I'll give everyone just a minute or so.
Someone has raised their hand, I see.
Oh, you, okay, good. Do go ahead.
Hi, thank you, first of all, for giving us this talk. It was really helpful. I wanted to ask, how would Eve White Literary Agency deal if they had an international client? If someone obviously we're in Egypt, if someone sent you a submission and you really liked it, how would you deal with that?
That's a very good question. So we represent clients all over the world. Most of them are in the UK, but you know, I can think of one who's in the US. I can think of one who lives in Tasmania. I can think of one who lives in Switzerland. So essentially, we would treat it as any other submission. So the only difference might be that you know, when it came to submitting to publishers, say if the for example, I'm thinking of one client who writes cookbooks, and he has a very, very big, he's British, but he has a very, very big following in the US. And so with him, we're thinking of going out on submission with his cookbook to the US first. So it really doesn't matter to us where a client lives. Of course, you know, publishers do see it as a bonus to have a writer be present for publicity when it comes to their book coming out. And of course, we know the UK market best, and so we would try to sell in the UK first. But then, you know, if someone has a particular reason, like for example, if someone were living in Egypt, then we would do our best to find a publisher in Egypt as well, and have either get the publisher on the job if they have rights, or get our translation rights sub-agent to see if they can find an Arabic publisher to publish over there.
Thank you, Ludo. I have a question. Mm-hmm. Okay, so most of the talk was about the fiction work. What about the non-fiction? Do you have someone specialized in the field to read these books, or how the process goes actually?
Absolutely, yes. So we don't have any specialized. I mean, we work on both fiction and non-fiction. So this, for example, is classified as non-fiction, even though it's a very creative piece of work. Okay. Because it's illustrated and because it's non-narrative. It is published by Penguin Michael Joseph, and they do work mostly on non-fiction. Essentially, what the main difference in how we read those submissions is, rather than asking for a for just an extract, we ask for what's called a proposal. And so a proposal isn't just it's rather than having just a short synopsis as you would with a novel, we go into a little bit more detail about what will be in each chapter, and what the shape of the book will be, and what talk a little bit more about the author, because it's very important with particularly with non-narrative nonfiction, like say a history book or a science book. It's very important for an author to have some level of authority and a platform. So that kind of biographical information will go in there as well. There's plenty of resources online that teach you how to write a nonfiction proposal. The reason we ask for that rather than a full manuscript usually is because the publishers do actually buy nonfiction books on proposal. They don't have to see a full manuscript. James had not completed the full manuscript of this before submitting to us, or before we sold the book to the publisher. So that's part of the reason why an advance works as well, is because it then gives an author the chance to have some income while they finish off their book. So with nonfiction, we ask for a proposal, but we do that all in-house, and we have everything from parenting guides to a memoir by a beautiful memoir by a guy who used to be an advertising executive and now lives in the woods and makes charcoal for a living, and it's a beautiful meditation on the power of nature to heal mental health issues. So really we look at the whole gamut of nonfiction and read across the spectrum. So yeah, that's the main difference, is that we don't usually have a whole book before we manage to sell a nonfiction title.
Okay, thank you. We have a question from Dr. Unair Qumus. Dr. Unair, if you're willing to say your question. I guess I'll read the question. I'll read the question.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So Dr. Unair was asking about why are short stories less popular or more difficult to publish? And she's saying, sorry, the question sounds a little naive, but she thought that novels are more difficult to publish.
That's it's a very good question. I wish I knew the answer. I mean, on the one hand, I can talk about the.
I thought you said something like this. That's why I asked the question.
No, I did absolutely.
Short stories are more difficult to publish.
They are.
Yeah. Go ahead. I prefer short stories, so I just was wondering why. Okay.
I love short stories, and I love working on them, and I love reading them. I think. I suppose I can talk more about the UK. I don't know if this is the case elsewhere. I know in the US as well, there's a slightly bigger market for short stories. I think there's more of a short story culture, but specifically in the UK, I don't know what it is, but I think readers, they feel that they want to sink their teeth into a narrative a lot of the time, and so there's a hesitancy to really buy short story collections, and publishers, publishing a book is a really big financial risk, and so if a publisher thinks, oh, I'm only going to be able to sell a few hundred copies of this book, then it's likely that they're not going to buy it, unfortunately. And that is the case. That is the number of copies that most short story collections sell. Unless something has won a prize, unless it's something by a writer who's extremely well known and who has that platform, then unfortunately it seems that readers don't react to short stories the same way as they do to a novel. And so yeah, that's the reason why. That's the reason why short story collections are more rare than novels. I'll say perhaps the other thing is that short stories can find a home in a different place. So they can find a home in a journal as a single short story rather than a book in a whole collection. So perhaps the short story readers find they get their fix from reading magazines like Granta, or sometimes the London Review of Books publish short stories at the end, and so or the New Yorker, whatever. So I think it's just it's a question of money, really, and of readership, unfortunately.
Okay, I was also wondering whether there is a difference now between publishing online and actually publishing the paper kind of books. Are we going towards publications online rather than the paper?
So
I'm sorry again, maybe that's another naive question, but
no, not at all, not at all.
Right. Yes, thank you.
Well, there was a very scary moment about 10 years ago in publishing where because of the stratospheric rise of ebooks, publishers seem to think, well, this could be the death of the print book. However, the rise of in most genres, the rise of ebooks stopped at a certain point. And depending on the genre and the type of book, then there is still a healthy balance between publication in electronic format and in print format. There are some types of books like very commercial thrillers, romance, that kind of thing, that now are selling more in ebook than they are in print. But there are others like literary fiction that are still selling far, far more in print than they are in ebook format. So it's a complicated question. It's different for every type of book, essentially. But I'm not afraid of print books disappearing. I think there's a very healthy market, and I think for every time there is a new format, there is a fear that it will extinguish some other format. But actually, what tends to happen is that it just reaches a readership who wouldn't normally have picked up a print book, for example. So in the past couple of years, the areas of publishing that have seen the biggest growth has been audiobooks, so narrated books, and they're seeing double-digit growth every year in publishing, and so in revenue, I mean, and so that's the way things are going. I think there's people are always going to find new ways of presenting books and offering new ways of reading, but I don't think the physical format is going anywhere.
Yeah, I think so too, because my grandchildren are buying books, so I just feel very secure they're doing this. Thank you very much, Ludo. Thank you.
Thank you, Ludo. We have 3 hands raised, so I'm going to start with the order that they were raised. So we're going to start with Angie and then move to Dr. Nagwa and then Dr. Ahlam. So Angie, please.
Hello, I was wondering how difficult it is to get published as a debut author, or if it's easier when you're a debut author. Yeah.
That's a very good question. So there is a certain value that being a debut author adds to the way a publisher considers you, and it's a very ugly thing to talk about, I think, because often if someone has published 1 or 2 books and has poor sales, then it can be very difficult to then have another book published. Whereas we have this real obsession with the new in the industry, which I really disagree with. But yeah, unfortunately, it's true that launching someone as a kind of this huge, exciting new talent is always going to look attractive to a publisher. However, that said, particularly in the past couple of years with the pandemic, it's been really, really difficult to launch new authors. And so publishers have been very, very conservative with buying books from first-time writers, because with a lot of bookshops being closed all around the world because of various lockdowns and things like that, then it was really hard to discover new writers for readers. And so the writers who were selling lots of copies were very established, and people whose books were very visible, that's on online bookshops like Amazon, or say in shops that were open like supermarkets. They sell books in supermarkets over here. So in the past couple of years, it's been extremely difficult to sell debut fiction. On the whole, I think it's, I suppose I do believe that if a book is good enough, then it's going to find a home one way or another. So regardless of how many copies the author has sold in the past, regardless of whether they're a new author or a returning author, I think it's it does, being a new author or having sold a not so impressive number of copies can play into it. But if the book is amazing, then the book is amazing, and it's just about finding the right publisher and the right person to get on board.
Thank you, Ludo. Dr. Nagwa, please ask your question.
Yes, sure. Okay, hello, Ludo. I just want to know, you mentioned that you, because you've got so many submissions, that only what's recommended by someone in your office, I don't remember the name. So my question here is, what makes you decide that that's a good read? This novel will succeed, or short story is a catch, knowing that people differ in what you think is amazing, may not be liked or thought of as amazing to others with different diversity in any country. So that's my question. And the manuscript, if you have it all together, affects your decision to say that the length, of a novel is what helps you make, or what the ideas inside, or what exactly makes you think that this one is amazing and will sell? Thank you.
Thank you. That's a very, very good question. So I think it's a combination of things. For one, it's on the kind of basest and most immediate side of things is the gut feeling that I have about the book. I love reading, and needless to say, if I didn't, I would be a very miserable person because I have to do so much of it. But if I, I'm sure you're all readers studying on this course, and
Absolutely.
When you get that feeling that of opening a book and starting it and really getting into it and feeling I want to press this book into everyone's hands. So that's one thing that I consider, do I have that love for it? And then after that, I have to make a more kind of cold, business-like, rational assessment as to whether I can see this book sitting next to others on a shelf. So next to other successful books, next to other books that have been published already. And so I start to think of, okay, already, I have to stop myself doing this when I read books for pleasure now, because it's a very horrible reflex and really takes the joy out of reading in some ways. But you have to think about, okay, what does this remind me of? Which authors can I compare this to, and which publishers might enjoy this? And usually, if I can come up with a list in my head of that of comparative titles, then I can then it's a good sign. I mean, I think it also depends on the type of book I'm reading. So if it's literary fiction, you know, I'm thinking, well, is this really taking me to some part of the human experience that I haven't been to before? Or if it's nonfiction, you know, I'm thinking, is this presenting a scientific topic that I had no idea about in a really interesting way? If it's a cookbook, I'm thinking, you know, what does this, you know, am I excited? Do I want to cook these things? So it's really, it's a combination of that kind of that intangible feeling of excitement and that more kind of business-like, calculated feeling of, okay, well, you know, can I see myself selling this to publishers?
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Lou. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Nagwa. Thank you, Ludo. I guess we have Dr. Ahlam now.
Hello. I would like to ask about translated poetry, Arabic poetry in translation. How do you read the UK market? And do you think that it's interested in such genre? What about the review and editing process? How does it go? Would you tell me more about it?
Sure. So with poetry, I have to really say that I'm not the best person to ask, just because I don't work on poetry or at all, basically, and that's just because it's not a market that I'm familiar with, and we don't accept poetry submissions. I think on the whole, what I do know is that poetry in even poetry written in English is a fairly small market. Again, I think, you know, we're back to the argument about short stories, and I think readers find, a lot of readers in the UK find that poetry isn't for them, which obviously is a failure of culture and a failure of the educational system, because of course poetry is for everyone, and we just need to, you know, we need to be better as an industry and as a country in terms of how we teach people to appreciate it and to really and to engage with it. So and on top of that, the UK has a very, very limited market for any work in translation, which is also another very sad thing. You know, as an immigrant myself, I'm from Italy. I find it really, really sad that you know, that the UK market is so closed to work written in other languages, and you know, that's not just true for books, it's true for films as well. We get so little international cinema here, and I think that's just to do with a kind of perceived cultural dominance that the UK has in the English language has anyway. So I would say that it would be a challenging thing to get poetry published in the Arabic poetry, or any translated poetry published in the UK. Equally, it does happen, and there are publishers working on that sort of thing. So there is a small but very active and engaged community who work on that sort of thing.
The same goes for modernist works that mix different genres, not only poetry. Yani it's a kind of prose poetry and narrative and metric poetry. So it goes for every kind of word in translation. You're saying that this applies to all work.
On the whole, yes. On the whole, it's unfortunately quite a small market. However, if a book is novel shaped, so even if it's written in verse, even if it's prose poetry and it looks like a novel, then there tends to be a little bit more interest, I find. And again, we go back to this idea that that there's something about readers who want to, when they buy the product, when they buy a book, I don't know, I guess they want something that they feel is complete and is a narrative in some way.
So if you are interested in publishing such works, do you advise me to contact a local publisher instead of an international one?
Yeah, I mean, in the first instance, yes. I think it would be really difficult to get translated work published if it doesn't have a publisher in the original language. So yes, I would say find a publisher in Egypt, and then hopefully there's ways to export that. But yeah. To answer the second part of your question in the first instance was about how yes, exactly, the review and editing process. So like I mentioned in my talk, so there's a certain amount of editing that we do with our clients. We're not professional editors. We only we edit to the point where we can, but we're not the best. We just try and get something as good as it can be so that it's in a position to receive as many offers from different publishers as possible. And that's a very informal process. We go back and forth with our client until we're both happy. And then once the publisher has a client, once the client has a publisher, they go back and forth with their editor, and it's a similarly informal process at first. When they're working on the content of the book rather than say copy editing and the more granular, correcting grammar and things like that. Then it's very informal and they go back and forth, and they're on more of a stricter schedule because they have to publish at a certain time. But once they do all the kind of, we call it a structural edit because they're changing the structure of a work, then after that, then the book is typeset, which means that the book is prepared for printing essentially. And at that point, you will do things like changing the odd comma here and there. It will be a more kind of technical edit. So that's a kind of very brief overview of how that works.
Sorry for asking too many questions, but I would like to know more about the rights of the translator versus the rights of the editor. Like if I participate in an international competition with work in translation, what rights should go for the editor and what rights should the translator preserve?
Well, so I don't work with translators, so that's a tricky question for me. I'm just trying to think of a practical application of what you're talking about. Could you explain a little bit more about the situation you're outlining?
I mean, how does the editor, how can the editor preserve his rights if he's doing some editing work on a translated book, and he exerts a lot of effort regardless of finance? I mean, should he be considered a co-author? Is he considered a co-author?
I see. No. So an editor is usually not considered a co-author because an editor is not creating any of the work. A translator is in some ways rewriting a work, whereas an editor is simply offering feedback and if it's a very hands-on edit which involves rewriting work, then yes, maybe they become a co-author. But usually if an editor is working for a publishing company, then that's part of their job is to edit, and so the rights remain with the translator and with the author.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
I'm good. Just a little bit aware of time, so I'm going to allow one final question, which is Omnia. Omnia, would you like to ask your question, please?
Okay, thank you so much, Ludo, for your talk. This is to start with. My question is the agency interested in publishing research papers, or should it be in a book form? When it comes to MA students, sometimes they are required to publish part of their thesis internationally. So are you interested in such a thing? And if so, what are the steps, or what is the process that we should follow to achieve that? Thanks ever so much in advance.
Thanks for the question. No, so we only work on books in trade publishing. So that's what we call, the books that you might find in a non-specialist, non-academic section of a bookshop. And so things like academic journals, papers, we tend not to work on. So we work on books that are for a general reader, for a consumer, if you will. Yeah, so I hope that answers the question.
Okay, thank you so much.
Okay, I'm just going to thank you very much, Ludo, for your really enlightening and interesting talk. I think it's given everybody really everybody's had lots of questions, including myself. You've elucidated them all. And it's really been fantastic that you've come to talk.
Thank you so much for having me and for all your questions. It's been a real pleasure.
Great, good. I'm going to move on to the second part now, and I think this ties in so well. So what we've heard now is so the literary agent's role once something has really been produced by an author. And the second part of the event, which is also my pleasure to introduce, is really very much earlier on in the process. So what we're going to be hearing today are readings by BUE English literature students. So a lot of the pieces they're reading, they're just short pieces. We have 5 readers. Is material that they developed within creative writing workshops. So there'll be short pieces, some short stories, novel excerpts. There's also some poems. So really a range, and this work is very much exploratory. It's very diverse in terms of voice. Some of it is very much genre fiction, other is it's realist literary fiction. So a whole range really. So the readers are in order: Rada Bakr, Joel Bedos, Roa Eid, Sophia Hussain, and Angie Gamali. And we start off with Rada Bakr, who's reading her short story, The Cafe.
Okay, hello. I'm gonna read this short story which I developed in our creative writing class that we took in university last year. And it's about a girl, a refugee in the UK. Okay, so the cafe. I sat down there, looking at those around me, those who seem so near yet so far away. At this moment, they are almost close enough that I could touch them, feel their imperfections underneath my query touch. I crave the roughness of the skin that hides the sores of the soul deep beneath them. I aim to pierce through, wanting to expose their most hidden experiences. My eyes perceive their little movements, pursuing their self-implemented discomforts. My gaze falls upon a woman apologizing to the cashier for the extravagance of her dress, and a man flinching every time a child passes beside him. Each must assume that their surrounding is the source of their discomfort. while their uneasiness actually stems from the lack of confidence, fear, or trauma. These people would reason their public anxieties upon those around them. In all reality, their social distress derived from their buried insecurities, ones they not only work so hard to hide, but to wipe off completely. What they do is shift unpleasant life instances into their hidden unconscious. Truthfully, it is nothing but an act that they willingly display. People are ready to do anything in order to achieve peace of mind, stupidly believing that they could possibly avoid the consequences of their actions or the effects of situations. Most certainly, these encounters never fully disappear. It's in human nature to attempt to outsmart all beings, even their own selves. All life circumstances touch us upon both a physical and spiritual levels. Only when a person accepts such a fact will they be able to achieve the process of transition, realization, and acceptance. Based on personal experience, it is easy to recite these matters. However, it is so much harder to instate them fully into a mental state. It is extremely difficult to come to terms with failure, abuse, or enforcement. That constant discomfort grows into a comfort zone, a place where no one is simply willing to venture out from as it develops into a routine. It becomes the unavoidable reality of life, or what some people would refer to as baggage. Months into my supposedly new life, I can't control my tendency to relate any kind of power outage to a terrorist bombing, random personal questions to government spies, or sadness to death and torture. However, regardless of my relentless appetite to uncover the public psychological agenda, I often feel so separate from my surroundings, as if I live in an adjacent world, where only I can see others, but I'm invisible to them. I have nothing in relation to this community. I find myself completely socially detached from this place. With time, I discovered a unique sense of melancholic tranquility while spending my time staring into my cup of coffee. I delve into the depths of the dark, capturing liquid. I watch the last few bubbles from the foamy surface of the hot drink disappear. It's almost cold now. I must have lost track of time again. I look at the wall clock on the wall of the small, cozy cafe that I've been spending most of my free time at, which is almost the whole day, every day. I've been here for 2 hours and 34 minutes to be exact. I have taken but 2 sips of my coffee. I haven't realized that I have been here for that long. The never-ending thread of people streaming through the doors of the place managed to distract me from entering my infinite loop of thoughts long enough. I have embraced my loneliness. As a matter of fact, I find peace in it. Although at times I find myself dreaming of the companionship of other humans, flashes of the past keep passing before my eyes. It is all nothing but a vague image that insists on displaying in my mind now. There is nothing that I could not give to get rid of the memories, to press pause on them. Yet, I hold on them for dear life. They're the only moments of happiness that I own, despite the sadness that they bring with them. My family was, anyways. All of these memories are shared in my mind by the excruciating screams and cries. Reliving the tainted past won't cause me any joy. Truly, my heart sinks every time I remember that they are nothing but the fuzzy production of my mind. Once I go in there, into my mind, I'm stuck. It is like a brutal, vicious cycle, which is exactly why I prefer to divert my attention to others. It is much easier and simpler that way. At least I will never reach culmination of my thoughts then, because I will never find the truth behind it. The sudden ringing of the chime harps bounces throughout the space of the small room, signifying the arrival of someone. I see a young woman, probably in her early 20s, walk through the door with her hands attached to those of a young girl of around 5 years old. The girl excitedly drags, who I'm guessing to be her mother, to the bakery corner. A single look into the lady's eyes spoke of sleepless nights and endless worries. Her smile drops almost the second the girl lets go of her hand to speak to the barista. There is definitely a mysterious yet attractive quality about her. I sit there wondering what might be her issue. Her body stays extremely stiff, as if trying to protect itself, and her face forms minimal expressions with occasional tight smiles. Her reserved manner reveals her inner shadows. Nevertheless, she's not attempting to hide, which is exactly what makes her captivating to others. She is closed book, yet present out there. A weak tug on the sleeve of my shirt broke my trance. I didn't notice that the young girl came up to me. I turned my head to her so quickly she jumped back a bit. Her eyes, her large grey eyes, such familiar eyes. I was staring so deeply into her eyes that I had not realized that the girl was speaking to me. I'm alerted when she starts waving her hand before my eyes. I shake my head to refocus my attention on her. Miss, she says repeatedly. Yes, what's going on, kiddo? I retort in my slightly Arabic-influenced accent. Are you okay? She said, surely taken aback by my delirious attitude. Am I? I am. I am okay. Why though? I wondered if I was merely repeating her question in order to grasp it, or if I was actually questioning my well-being. Lola wants to sit here, she said. I scan the room but don't spot any empty tables. Although she's basically requesting to breach my dear privacy, her eyes expel a certain kind of innocence that I could not possibly refuse her request. Who is Lola? I ask. My sissy, she says. I smile at her cute voice and facial expressions. Such a pure creature. Of course, go tell your sister to come, I reply hesitantly. She reminds me of my little sister, Rudina. Oh, how I miss it there. The memories start fogging my vision once more, slowly excluding me from my current reality. I would give up anything to go back on Yemeni grounds, among my people, to hear my mother scolding because of the dirty dishes, or my father obsessing over a football match and asking for his 100th cup of coffee in a span of 24 hours. If I could get a chance, I would boil him a 1,000th cup of coffee. Nevertheless, it is all done. It is over. They're definitely gone. I wish I belonged in a video game where I could have chances of revival. Yet the game of life doesn't work that way. I think it has a funny way of operating. If only I could play one more game, pass one more level. I'm here, not there. I'm here, not there. I am. Hello, we're extremely sorry for bothering you, but Beth, you have been nagging me for a choco muffy for quite a while now, she says in her thick Yorkshire dialect with a smile. She must be a local. I'm Norina, but everyone calls me Lola, she adds, while extending her hand towards me. I linger my gaze at her hand for quite a while now, as if in shock. I haven't made any social contact with people for quite a while. She begins contemplating whether to retrieve her hanging arm as seconds pass with no reaction. I break from my trance and shake her hand. Amira, I mutter lowly. I'm sorry, I didn't quite catch that. She inquires further. It's okay, my name is Amira, I say in a louder tone, trying to shake my out of my fuzzy state. Oh, you're a foreigner, she insists in a high enthusiastic tone upon hearing my speech. Where are you from? She says. I grow anxious a bit, thinking if I should be truthful with her. Oh, silly me, don't mind anything that I just said. I'm just a curious person by nature. You don't have to answer that question by any means. She awkwardly laughs. Just simply disregard it. My mother always tells me that curiosity killed the cat, and one day it will cause me an issue. She stops suddenly, smiling sheepishly. Wow, now I'm officially ranting. Here, let us start over. I'm Irina, she says, extending her hands once more. I find myself smiling at her haphazard wickedness. I can't believe I saw her as close as serious. The next time I catch a glimpse of the clock, I see that 2 more hours have passed. 2 weeks later, I'm waiting for Lorena at our distant spot at the cafe. We are going shopping this afternoon. Good morning, I greet the barista and grab a seat at my table. Truthfully, I haven't healed. Actually, I'm nowhere near that. I still lose track of time and experience nightmares on a nightly basis. I don't think they will ever disappear. Nevertheless, I have been communicating with Lorena, although we don't have shared the same darkness. We don't have to. I sit down there, looking at those around me and sigh. Each person has a problem consuming his or her thoughts. People, I included, continue to disregard confrontations and solutions and choose ignorance, self-hate, and isolation. Forgetting the strengths can only be best from within oneself. Life does go on. Thank you.
Thank you. So the next reader is Joelle Bedours. We'll get a slide up. There we are. And it's a short fiction piece comprising 5 parts. It's called Remnants of a Letter on Earth.
Hello. So I wrote my short story last year for the creative writing class. Essentially, it is about 2 lovers who have been driven away from each other by unexplained divine forces. And it was actually inspired by Annabel Lee by Edgar Allan Poe, the poem. The paragraphs are divided into 3 settings: heaven, hell, and earth. Okay, so I will start. Remnants of a letter on earth. This is not goodbye, my love, nor is it the last time I shall look upon your face as if it is the last light in the universe. Because someday, when I awake in the heavens to find myself cleansed of memories, after I laugh and dance and feel not a drop of sorrow, when I see your eyes again, when I recognize the face they tried to banish from my mind, the ocean inside me will drown the stratosphere. It will plunge all celestial thing into the dark. Because how could a thing call itself holy when it has torn away the memory of you? When it has left me unremembering of the golden smile it has so recklessly created and left me to my own when I so carefully wish to keep it. The descent into hell. The darkness around me is a physical presence. It is heavy on my soul. I am being drowned by this ruthless world. I want nothing but peace now, nothing but the quiet. To sink into that will grant me the gentleness this world never did. This world was too cruel to smile at a love like ours. Do not grieve, do not give them something to be proud of. We will meet again one day in the darkness, but do not worry, we will make it light. And when you smile, you will make it warm. We will build it ourselves this time, and what was once darkness will be our heaven, and you will be my home. Heaven, before the fall. I dance away now, drunk on divine ecstasy, floating away in the sky, limitless in a way I never imagined. There is nothing but delirium, happiness in so much abundance. I smile all day and my cheeks do not hurt. I dance all night and never get tired. I feel so much happiness and never question where it came from. I simply accept the greatness of eternity, and with it I'm granted more bliss. It never gets dull, never repetitive. I want nothing but to cry in joy over the dreamlike perfection of it all. An angel smiles at me from afar. He beckons me to him. I move, my skin ablaze. I am entranced by his aura, my smile shining like gold. We have been each other's company ever since I awoke in this paradise. Decades, centuries, eons ago. He is sitting, I am standing above him, looking at his beautifully carved face, at his lean build that has fought wars. If I had a breath, it would stop. He grins up at me, reaches for my hand. I flinch. By some preposterous instinct, I find myself backing away. The shock is written in his now grotesque eyes. I feel the walls of heaven closing in on me. I'm not supposed to breathe, but I feel like I'm suffocating. But I know why I have recoiled from his touch. I remembered you, and finally descended back into hell. The memory of you breaching the forbidden borders of my mind. Hell is a flood of memories. I have felt for you a longing so deep it sundered the celestial sky where I languished, until they realized my mind had once again crawled its way back to you, grasped for the haze of memories they could not rid out of me. They thought time could wipe away my memory of you, but even if they had burned me in hellfire, they could not burn away the way you have engraved yourself in my soul. They have banished me now, once they realized I was tarnished with your memories, that their methods have failed, the angels released their fury on me. They deemed me unworthy of the luxuries of heaven they had once granted me for forgetting you. But they do not understand that my place was never in their heaven. There was no paradise where I could not recall your love. They thought hell was punishment, but they forgot hell is where they have thrown you, and I will tear it apart until I find you. Earth. We sit in my car in our usual spot, the same place where it all happened, where I smiled and I saw your smile for the first time. That first time, flushed faces, eyes sparkling inside closed lids. Caressing hands to feel more touch, a deep longing for the forbidden. I look at him now, his sunlit smile still brings me to tears. The weight of his hand on mine is all the touch I'll ever need. It drives me crazy how he is mine, yet I can never have him. Hell, the fall. As I descend, I worry that it has all been a trick. Why would they banish me to the place where you reside? Why would they give me a chance to find you after all they have done to eradicate you from my life? I walk in the darkness and I worry. Will you recognize my touch, the eyes that have glanced at you in longing, the lips that have memorized every freckle on your skin, the heart that has melted beneath your ever-glowing soul? Or have they perished your memory of me? Would you still know to hold my hand and think it that the universe has built itself for us to bear each other's touch? I search through all of hell for you. I crawl to the underworld and hope to hear a whisper of your voice. I look inside every pair of black, deathless eyes, behind every beaming, heaven-lit smile, hoping to find a hint of your soul in one. But once again, they have found me before I could find you. Earth in a sunlit bedroom. I have tried so hard to tame down my longing. I have driven myself half crazy with logic. But here I am, with a life where I have the sun for a companion, where light radiates from my very soul. I open my eyes to infinite freckles on skin, to soft hair, and the crack of a morning voice. If not for the dread in my heart at what they will do if I don't keep him safe, this would have laughed at God's paradise. Hell. In this eternity where I am enchained, where the thrumming of our hearts has been deemed evil, I lay my head against the wall and I close my eyes. I can see your face, and despite their effort, my heart thrums at the memory of it. You have filled me with sorrow, and I can no longer breathe, only grasp for air and crumble in grief. I remember stroking your cheek with my finger, catching your chin in my hand, reaching out to hold your hand only to find you finishing my movement. It has been a long time, my love, thrown away in this darkness, left in the night. How long will the memory of your arms around me keep me warm? Earth. I don't know how or when or why I managed to get him, to make him what he is to me. I don't know how I managed to make something I only saw in my dreams happen before my eyes. I do not know where my happiness begins and where I end. Hell. I am cooped up, a shivering body, a frazzled soul, a shell of memories. I know that when I see the light, I should feel something. Light is hope, isn't it? But when that golden light falls on me, all I feel is dread, a deep knowing fear of something that had always been inevitable. I want nothing but to go back to the dark. At least then I could pretend, dream in the darkness, but the light shines still, forcing me to look. And there he is, in the golden light, his eyes ablaze, his skin battered, his smile crooked, his eyes reaching for mine. It has been years, centuries, eons. I feel my soul falling back into me. I've been looking for you, a tear falls, for so long. His voice is ragged, broken. It was once yellow. I push myself to my feet, my heart a thunderstorm inside my chest as I reach for him. I walk to grasp his outstretched hand, but I do not get to, because he vanishes, and the golden light vanishes with him. And once again, I found myself falling, their laughter rumbling as I descend. Earth. He laughs at something I say over the phone, and I think, this is what love is. It's not supposed to be earth-shattering, but as soft as his laugh. The descent, if there is a place under hell, maybe that is where I'm going. The sky turned black, the ocean stumbled, the ground is swept from underneath my feet, my soul suspended far enough from the heavens to ever wish for redemption. I fall into the black abyss. I fall away from you. I hold on to your memory because it is the only thing I cannot lose. As I fall, I feel the burn of the fire, the howls of the tormented, but my heart screams loudest of all. Thank you.
Next up is Roa Eid, who's going to be reading an excerpt from her fantasy novel.
Hello, this is a short excerpt from my novel Light Amidst the Fire, which is the second book in my fantasy trilogy. In this world, there's a lot of civil war, political intrigue, and a conflict between humans and magical folk. At the end of the first book, one of the main characters, Joa, who is a member of the race of Redwood Elves, betrays all the others and goes off on his own. This chapter is the first glimpse the reader gets into what he's been up to after leaving the other characters to pursue his own agenda. Chapter 3, Breeds Monsters. Our story begins with hope. But, dear reader, sometimes hope can be twisted into something dark and cruel and vicious. Sometimes hope can be used to justify heinous crimes and acts of true evil. Sometimes hope for justice to prevail can take the form of a terrible vengeance. Sometimes hope is that one meager thing we desperately hold on to, the only lifeline left for us to cling to in our sea of madness and rage. And a violent wish seen as hope is the most tragic thing of all. You should not be alarmed as you enter the quaint home nestled in the trees of Deros. It was large enough to tell you that these people weren't poor, but modest enough to let you know that they were not nobility. All was silent, as it should be in the deep hours of night. None but the moon and the stars laid witness to what befell that home. And us, of course. Do not be frightened by that crackle. The fire still blazed in the hearth, filling the room with a gentle light and a comforting warmth. There was a small leather pouch hung over the fire, filled with cinnamon and other herbs, causing a blissful aroma to drift through the house, even out the window, and the passers-by could smell it in the air around this lovely home. This was a trick the old woman had learned from her mother and her mother's mother. She'd passed it on to her son's wife, who'd hoped to pass it on to her own son's wife. Now it covered the stench. Keep your heart from racing. Your eyes will immediately fall onto the floor, but let them first wander over the wonderful tapestries the old woman weaved, the clay pots her son made, and the lumpier ones his son tried to make. Take in the beauty of life and growth in the notches to mark the boy's height on the wall. Remind yourself that wherever there is destruction, there is also memories of light. Now I cannot keep you from reality for much longer, my dear friend. You must face the horror soon enough. So look down on the ground. See the carpet of blood as it grows until there is nothing left of the ground. Inhale deeply, let the sweet smell of cinnamon mix with the coppery tang and the sharp bite of urine and waste and decay. Let your eyes fall, one by one, to the bodies on the floor, or what remained of them. The young woman was the least mangled, having simply 2 arrows in her chest, the first having missed her heart by a fraction. Her eyes were still wide with shock, not comprehending what had happened. She had been the first to die. Her husband had stood at attention instantly, searching for who had taken his love. He'd picked up his sword from his place at the door. He didn't have much use for it. His father had reluctantly accepted that he wouldn't follow in his footsteps and be a knight. But the man still knew how to use a sword. Alas, it did not matter, as just as quickly as his wife fell, an arrow found its mark through his throat. He gurgled as he fell, reaching for his mother, for who else do we turn to when nothing but death looms? The old woman wailed, a sound torn from a place only mothers have knowledge of, and sank to her knees next to her little boy, who had not been a little boy for many years, but alas, that was what he seemed now. Her hands soaked in his blood as she pressed them to his throat, that she did not realize the knife at her own until it sliced a neat, sharp line across. Her body slumped over her son's. The old man was not looking at his wife or his son or his daughter-in-law. He was staring at the figure before him. He stood up straight and drew his own sword, despite the many years it had been since he'd done so, a knight to the very end. He could see the figure clearly now, and his confusion ebbed away. He understood what was happening and why, and he would sooner die than beg one of them for his life. I did my duty to cleanse the world of impurity. The 5 will welcome me to their glory halls. The figure did not respond, simply moved in a flash until the old man's sword was swept from his hands, and the knife, still slick with his wife's blood, was at his neck. But the figure did not give him the quick death the others had gotten. The knife found its way down the old man's chest until it carved a path over his heart. A rag was shoved in his mouth to muffle his screams, as his chest was transformed into a canvas and a painting of death emerged among the ribs and the lungs. His heart was still beating, though, until finally it was cut out of his body and tossed into the hearth, blood dripping down the wood. Joa stood up and wiped his knife on the upholstered chair the old man had occupied. He barely glanced at the others, but his cold silver eyes did not stray from the old knight. The man had gained a lot of weight since his retirement, and his head had gone completely bald, and his beard was stark white. He had not been fighting for a long time. And now he would never fight again. Joa's face was unreadable, dear reader, even to myself. But I can assure you that there was no smile on his face, no mad, unhinged grin as he stepped carefully around the bodies, his boots unable to escape pressing into the pool of blood beneath. He had not taken joy in this, and he was now, if only for an infinitesimal moment, satisfied. Suddenly, a sound like shuffling feet came from behind him. Joa did not turn around until he heard the pained gasps and whimpers. It was a boy, could not have been more than 13 years in this world, staring at the murdered corpses of his family. He had soft red curls, as was standard this far north, light brown eyes sparkling with tears, and a smattering of freckles on his nose. They had freckles too. Joa blinked the thought away and continued staring at the boy. Anguish was captured so perfectly on his face as his chin quivered and his nose sniffled and his eyes could no longer hold back the gushing of tears. He finally looked up at Joa and asked, his voice barely over a whisper, "Why?" "We'd do anything and everything for family." But Joa did not say anything out loud. His grip merely tightened on his knife. He'd miscalculated. He'd wanted to kill everyone quickly and leave the old knight for last. But he didn't account for a grandson. He wondered if a slit throat would be crueler or a life of grief. He was about to opt for the second option when the little boy howled in rage and ran at him with a mallet Joa hadn't noticed clutched in his hand. Before Joa could move, the boy brought down the mallet hard on Joa's chest. If the boy had done this a week or so ago, the mallet would have crushed Joa's ribs and concaved his chest, making him choke on his own blood. But alas, the mallet simply glanced off Joa's skin, and the boy stumbled, losing his balance. Joa let the corner of his mouth twitch slightly, wondering why he'd never thought of the merits of invulnerability before. The boy's gaze found Joa again, this time filled with horror, as he whispered, "What are you?" Joa let the cold steel of the knife rest against the boy's cheek. He really was so very young, and must still enjoy stories of the demons across the forest. He leaned down until his lips were pressed to the boy's ears. "A monster." "Thank you."
Sophia Hussein will be reading next. She'll be reading 4 poems.
Hi everyone, I will be reciting my poetry and I'll give you all the background to what inspired me to write each one of them. So my first poem is called A Message from Heaven, and I wrote this nearly 3 years ago after I took a class on the Renaissance era. I was really inspired by the art of that time and how they used religious symbols like angels to send a message through their art. So here's the poem. I woke up today for the 6,951 time, opened my eyes to a sight so divine. There in front of me they stand, with an old scripture in hand. I pray my soul they do not take. If this a dream, then I wish to wake. But what they say next, I did not see coming. They say, by thee whom we are serving, we come to give you a warning. I ask, what warning is to be given, that angels such as yourselves be driven from heaven to earth, from God to a human. So they unfold the scripture to read, thou must pay his deed, or in the name of God, thou shalt bleed. So that's my first poem. And my second poem is called A Cloudy Day at the Beach. And so this poem was just inspired by a trip to the beach that I took with my family a while back. It doesn't really have any great significance other than the fact that it was just a nice day. So a cloudy day at the beach. The sea calls in waves while the sand beckons with grains. The sky gestures with light while the clouds pass in pain. The sadness on everyone's face as the wind blows, leaving no trace. Traces of footprints left on the sand, left by the movements of man. As the day comes to an end, the people gather to amend all the shattered parts they remembered by heart. No more do they leave parts of each on a cloudy day at the beach. So that's my second poem. And my last 2 poems are spoken word poems. The first one is called Repression, and it's about suppressing your thoughts or even feelings and realizing that later on, like in your entire life is an illusion that you created due to your reliance on repression. It isn't really inspired by anything. Also, it's just one of those 2 a.m. realizations you come to, so you write it down. Okay. Repression. Repressing my thoughts is what helped me live a life of illusion. But one day the illusion starts to fade once other people start to look at you with narrowed eyes, eyes filled with pity, eyes filled with judgment. And one day one of them opens their mouth, but you refuse to believe what comes out. You refuse to leave that land, the land you created, the castle you chose to hide in because you told yourself, What's behind those giant wooden gates is that of terror and madness. But little did you know, all the truly happy people were behind those gates, running around in fields of daisies and daffodils. And the real madness was that of your own. And as you look around, you slowly start to notice the walls of your castle and how they start to close in, and the entire castle starts reshaping. Suddenly, you find yourself not in your majestic castle, but in a small cage with no door, no escape. And you finally see the illusion you've lived in your whole life because you refuse to come to terms with your thoughts. That's the third one. And my last one, my last piece is probably my favorite. I wrote this on my 21st birthday, and I associate every birthday with the idea of rebirth, like a new year and a new beginning. You have, and I always have this moment of awareness of my existence for a split second. So that's when I wrote this piece titled "I Am Me." I am me, I am myself, I'm everything. I'm overcome with a new sense of self. I'm aware, I'm aware, I'm aware. I exist in the here and now. I exist in the present and the future. The past me is dead. In her coffin, she lays wondering what has become of me. I am me, I am myself, I am everything. I'm the wind, the breeze that blows into me is the obstacles I have overcome. I push through it. I push into a new beginning. I'm dead, but life resides in me. It resides in the poems I write, the words I speak, and the thoughts I give life to. I give life. I am life. I'm me. I'm everything. I'm the sun. The light that shines upon me is my muse. It's me. I'm the sun. The sun is I. It shines, and with it I shine. We are one. I'm the moon. I look up at the night sky filled with constellations that have been dead for centuries. They are me. The past that has died yet still is seen. The night sky with its moon and stars. Me and my past coexisting with each other. We are one. I'm me. I'm everything. I'm the trees with the roots so long, they hold so much of the past. The leaves are I, while the roots are my past. They hold me down as I still grow. We are one. I am me. I'm everything. Thank you very much.
And finally, we have Angie Gamali, who's going to be reading a short story called The Carnival.
So my story is called The Carnival. I wrote it back in 2017. Well, it wasn't the first short story I wrote, nor the last. It was the first one where I felt like I wanted to expand upon it, so make it a novel. So yeah, The Carnival. Amidst the cold, harsh winter in London, the quiet whispers are not to be missed. Henrietta hears hushed tones of people asking others if they had heard of the recent kidnappings as she passed by. Her azure eyes widen for a moment. She pauses, eager to find out more. But she proceeds to move forward, now with a subtle gallop, fearing that she would raise suspicion if she stays in one place for too long. She walks towards a newspaper stand and watches the dark printed letters invading her vision. They all scream the same exact words on how children are being kidnapped as they walk home from school, and that the police have no idea who is behind it. "What's a cute girl like you doing out here on her own?" the news agent asks, calls from behind the stand, interrupting Henrietta's many thoughts. "I'm just looking for something my grandma would read," she stutters. "You better hurry home quickly, young girl. You never..." A rugged voice interrupts the news agent. "He's right, ain't he? Were you looking for something to entertain yourself with?" He hands her a paper bursting with colors and continues. "This might be of interest to you, then." The ominous paper has a crimson and velvet blue background, contrasting with the shimmering gold of the words. The young man looming above her is wearing a glimmering tuxedo, emerald green with peach highlights. Her first thought was to look down. As it is, Henrietta is shocked at the collection of unusual colors in front of her. He has lilac makeup underneath his eyes, forming make-believe tear streaks, 3 under his right eye and 2 under his left. His pale skin and startling white hair make the lilac tears appear darker than they are. His right eye is covered in bangs, although as the wind blew, she glimpsed a peculiar yet distinct red iris in the eye beneath his hair, despite his other iris being brown. Noticing her staring, he adds, "I'm William, by the way," with a quick blink and a forced smile. She straightens herself, Henrietta, then proceeds to give a slight bow of respect, smiles, and walks away. For the past week, all she could think about was the man's wild eyes And so, unable to control her curiosity, there she is, standing in front of the carnival he invited her to, the Carnival of Dreams. The glistening lights of red, blue, and yellow have her in awe. The yellow spotlight illuminates, making it seem like the night sky was full of endless stars. The red makes it appear as if the floor is glowing with patches of incinerating fires. The blue reflects upon the astronomic Ferris wheel. A humble woman, ripe with youth, comes up to Henrietta. With her ginger hair and an echoing voice reminiscent of angels singing lullabies. She asks for Henrietta's tickets, then escorts her towards a tent in the back. Henriette feels as if time has been set at a fraction of the speed. She grins as she hears the self-chuckling of friends as they pass by them, the ecstatic squeals of children as they are granted approval to rides, and the subtle smiles on their parents' faces, knowing that they cause them insurmountable joy. Despite time going by excruciatingly slow, no one has taken notice of Henrietta's presence, not that she minds. The stars and lights dance amongst each other as if they were listening to a harmonious song. Their performance is so captivating, she almost hears the song on a number of occasions. A sweet, delightful hum that manages to evoke feelings of passion and despair all at once. But then again, it could just be her wild imagination. The smell of smoke almost brings her out of her short-lived trance. A woman comes to her side, holds her hand, and gestures her to look upwards. Henriette notices a young performer cycling on a tightrope. The performer is wearing a purple ballerina suit. However, upon her head is a hat that is the color of pearls, that reminds her of William's hair. Henriette looks down at her hand and requests the woman to loosen her grip on it. It was quick, but she sees the woman flinch for a moment as she accommodates Henriette's request with a dismayed face. Then she asks Henriette about the performer, once again in the same Elaine voice. Henriette's mind becomes foggy, but she feels herself enter a trance. Henriette attempts to snatch her hand back as she feels distress, but as the woman turns, she is frozen in place. The woman's once tranquil eyes are now startling. Stay still, girl, her body language bellows. As the woman starts speaking, Henriette can feel her eyes grow weary. Master, she's here. A man starts walking towards them, singing creepily. A little bit of magic will do the trick, a little bit of love, and you'll take all I need. And I only need you to stay here, my dear, because I'm the only thing you should fear. Abruptly, his face inches closer to hers, the last thing she sees before disappearing into a void of darkness, one she has grown accustomed to. Except, even in the darkest of abysses, she cannot escape the feeling that his face was looming over her, constantly watching. That face looks so familiar, however, she can discern the most minor of differences. His eyes are narrower, his unmistakable red iris has shifted sides, along with the streaks of fake tears. She hears a faint murmur in the background. Damn it, I should not have let William pick the girl. She's as useless as they get. The nauseous smell of old blood that reeks throughout the room shocks her back into consciousness. In close vicinity, she sees 5 people forming a wide circle and arguing, including the performer and the woman. At the center, a man with unmistakable alabaster hair is kneeling down. William, she thinks. She sees his mirrored clone standing above him, emitting a murderous intent as he stares his brother down. She looks down at her hand, and her eyes widen as she sees the blood-stained knife and the bloody body in chains in the corner. Her mind is clouded with a million thoughts, but one was most explicit. I'm a murderer, she says, shaking. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm just going to start my video. So this concludes the readings for today. I want to thank everybody. Ludo's had to leave, but you'll see in the chat he's invited everyone who wants who's got work to submit to the agency. Clearly you've got a name now that you can conjure with. So if you have some work, do consider that. I hope you've enjoyed the evening. I want to especially thank our readers. Fabulous readings, really lovely. You can see from the audience reaction in the chat that it's been really enjoyable. I want to also end by, I want to do a few more of these events. So I will work together with my colleagues, maybe to, do a few more. It would also be fabulous really to, start maybe some extracurricular creative workshops for people to develop work, even if they're not doing the creative writing module. And maybe that's something you can talk amongst yourselves about. And I'm really happy to host that, even though it will be remote. Just to be able to share readings is just such a wonderful thing. So thank you, everyone, and thank you for coming.
Thank you so much, Dr. Carleen, and thanks for our attendees and for our lovely students. Looking forward to the coming sessions and coming webinars and events. Thank you all.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Huda. Thank you, Dr. Carleen. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. I really enjoyed.
Thank you so much.